Around 2300 to 30 BC, a new player emerges on the Mesopotamian scene, Sargon, founder of the Akkadian Empire. In a region until then dominated by the Sumerian city-states, the arrival of this conqueror ushers in a new phase of political unification. For the first time in Mesopotamian history, a ruler succeeds in bringing almost the entirety of Sumer under his control, organizing a centralized state and laying the foundations of an imperial administration. Ancient texts, notably the cuneiform inscriptions dating from the Akkadian period or later, recount a legend surrounding the birth of Sargon. It tells of an infant abandoned on the Euphrates in a basket of reeds, a fascinating echo of the biblical story of Moses. According to this story, Sargon was then found and raised by a gardener in the service of the king of Kish. As an adult, he seized power, ending the reigning dynasty and founding his own capital, Akkad. The exact location of this city remains debated by archaeologists, but it is imagined to be somewhere north of the Sumerian region, probably on the mid-course of the Euphrates. From this point, Sargon embarks on a series of military campaigns against the great city-states of Sumer. Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Umma, all successively fall under his control. To assert his authority, he does not settle for simple military victories. He imposes the presence of a governor loyal to him in each city. Thus, he establishes an unprecedented centralized administration, overseeing both the collection of taxes and the distribution of resources, such as water and cereals. This form of government breaks with the Sumerian tradition of local power exercised by autonomous kings or rulers. Another key aspect of Akkadian domination lies in language. Sargon and his successors favored Akkadian for administration and diplomacy, even though Sumerian remained the religious and scholarly language. The very ancient Sumerian retained immense cultural prestige, particularly for the writing of myths and rites. Over time, the coexistence of these two languages shaped Mesopotamia. Akkadian, of Semitic origin, gained ground in everyday exchanges, while Sumerian persisted in temples and scribes' schools. The Akkadian Empire also stood out by establishing roads and posts, real marked routes where outposts allowed for the rapid supply of the army or messengers. This innovation facilitated the exercise of power over a vast territory, sometimes distant from decision-making centers. In military terms, Sargon was known for conducting large-scale campaigns, mobilizing numerous and disciplined troops, an unprecedented feat in the history of Mesopotamia. He thus established the principle of the standing army, maintained by agricultural surpluses and tributes imposed on conquered cities. Upon Sargon's death, the throne of Akkad passed to his heirs, including Rimush and Manishtusu, who had to manage an empire still young and facing local resistance. The Sumerians, proud of their independence, often revolted against Akkadian authority, believing that foreign domination contradicted their civic and religious traditions. Sargon's first two successors spent much of their governance suppressing uprisings. Simultaneously, they worked to consolidate the empire's prosperity by developing new diplomatic ties. Akkadian envoys traveled the roads leading to Elam, southwest of modern Iran, Syria, or even Anatolia, establishing commercial agreements to secure supplies of metals and wood. Rimush and Manishtusu thus sought to maintain Akkadian unity by alternating military repression and economic openness. Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, marked the pinnacle of the Akkadian Empire. Aware of the need to strengthen his legitimacy, he proclaimed himself king of the four regions of the world. This title aimed to emphasize that he ruled theoretically over the entire known horizon, the east, west, north, and south. In some inscriptions, Naram-Sin went further, practically elevating himself to the status of a living god, an unprecedented gesture in Mesopotamian tradition, where the king was previously considered a privileged servant of the gods, but not a god himself. In military terms, Naram-Sin extended the empire towards Syria, Anatolia, in present-day northern Turkey, and eastwards, probably towards Iran or more eastern regions. The Akkadian power then seemed unshakable, supported by an effective army, a rigorous administration, and dynamic trade flows. Despite these successes, the unity of the Akkadian Empire began to fracture. In the Sumerian cities, attachment to local culture remained very strong. Religious traditions, the use of Sumerian during ceremonies, and civic pride fueled rebellious movements. Appointed Akkadian officials were sometimes ousted, and populations tried to restore their ancient royal lineages. Historians believe that this resistance, although often repressed, weakened the imperial structure by multiplying tension centers. While the successors of Naram-Sin tried to maintain order, a new threat emerged from the Zagros Mountains, located to the northeast of Mesopotamia. This mountain range now forms the border between Iraq and Iran. At the time, various peoples lived there, including the Gutians, mentioned in Akkadian sources as invaders coming from a harsh and isolated environment. Taking advantage of internal troubles and periodic famines plaguing the empire, the Gutians descended into the Mesopotamian plains. The Akkadian Empire, weakened by these difficulties, was no longer able to effectively mobilize its military resources. The Gutians then settled in several strategic regions, pillaging and taking over poorly defended cities. In a few years, the Akkadian Empire collapses due to internal revolts and external attacks led by the Gutians. Akkad loses control of entire regions. Trade routes become disorganized, reducing the influx of raw materials and wealth. The economy undergoes a rapid decline, exacerbated by the destruction of canals and urban centers. Demographically, insecurity pushes many inhabitants to flee, leading to an exodus to safer areas or a return to less centralized lifestyles. The fall of the Akkadian Empire leaves a political vacuum. The Sumerian cities, subjected for nearly a century, regain some form of autonomy. They try to reorganize to rebuild their infrastructures and develop their alliances without the direct interference of an imperial power. However, these cities are very weakened. Successive wars and economic crises have ruined the countryside, destroyed part of the crops, and made canal maintenance more difficult. Sources describe a return to a political fragmentation, meaning a division into multiple local powers, always ready to confront or form ephemeral pacts. In this unstable environment, some Sumerian cities temporarily managed to rebound, initiating what will later be called the Sumerian Renaissance under the third dynasty of Ur. However, the memory of Sargon and Naram-Sin remains vivid, for the Akkadian Empire will remain both a model and a cautionary tale in Mesopotamian memory. Future kings, whether Sumerian, Babylonian, or Assyrian, will draw inspiration from the idea of broad domination and centralized administration, while keeping in mind the fragility of an empire exposed to internal weaknesses and external forces. At the very beginning of the second millennium BC, Mesopotamia emerges from a period of turmoil. The Gutians, a people from the Zagros Mountains, have left the Sumerian plain, leaving behind a fragmented political landscape and weakened cities. However, this power vacuum will quickly be filled thanks to the ambition of some visionary rulers. It is in this context that the figure of Ur-Nammu, founder of the third dynasty of Ur, emerges. Around 2112 BC, Ur-Nammu takes power in the city of Ur, located in Lower Mesopotamia. Immediately, he undertakes a series of administrative reforms. He reorganizes the state apparatus, appoints governors loyal to him, and establishes a centralized operation that quickly proves effective. To consolidate this revival, Ur-Nammu builds the Great Ziggurat of Ur, a monumental multi-tiered temple dedicated primarily to Nana, the moon god. This construction, made of mud bricks, symbolizes the renaissance and regained power of the city. Moreover, Ur-Nammu distinguishes himself by promulgating one of the oldest known legal texts, the Code of Ur-Nammu. Although it has reached us in a fragmented manner, this code testifies to a desire to codify laws to govern daily life, both for the protection of individuals and for the regulation of the economy. The reign of Ur-Nammu is often depicted as a golden age. Cuneiform inscriptions mention the restart of commerce. Caravans reconnect Ur to Iran, Anatolia, and more distant lands. Cities are beautified, not only through the restoration of temples, but also via civil construction such as paved streets or administrative buildings. The royal tombs of Ur, famous for their sumptuous jewelry, adorned with gold and precious stones, partially date from this period, revealing the city's recovered opulence. Upon the death of Ur-Nammu, his son Shulgi ascends the throne. He inherits a relatively stable situation and seeks to further consolidate the Sumerian state. Shulgi implements a provincial organization. The kingdom is divided into districts led by officials responsible for tax collection, resource distribution, and law enforcement. To reinforce this structure, Shulgi establishes a centralized archive system, where scribes record all movements of goods and the labor duties imposed on the population. To facilitate exchanges, he also creates a network of roads marked by milestones, providing waypoints for the movement of soldiers or caravans. Religion remains a lever of political legitimization. Shulgi, like his predecessors, maintains the cult of Nana and exalts that of Inanna, the great goddess of love and war. However, he takes a further step by proclaiming himself a living god in some inscriptions. This approach, which may seem bold given the Sumerian tradition, aims to further sacralize the royal function, making the king not only an intermediary with the deity, but also a semi-divine entity in his own right. Under Shulgi's reign, the third dynasty of Ur extends its influence over much of Lower Mesopotamia. The routes to Iran and Syria become essential for the trade of metals, wood, and luxury products. Archival texts mention military campaigns and control posts established in peripheral regions. Scribes meticulously record the tributes paid by conquered territories, which helps to further enrich the capital and strengthen royal power. Cuneiform tablets have revealed a surprising facet of Shulgi. He is said to have written hymns in his honor, highlighting his warrior strength, political wisdom, and even his mastery of music. Although the extent of propaganda in these writings remains unknown, they reflect a sovereign concerned about his image and convinced that cultural prestige goes hand in hand with military power. Thanks to centralized administration, urban development projects multiply. Ziggurats are enlarged or renovated, and construction techniques are refined. The raw bricks are better fired, more uniform, and workers are better supervised by foremen from the scribal elite. Irrigation canals, vital elements in this arid climate, are repaired or redesigned to prevent water shortages. Major Sumerian cities adopt more structured layouts, with neighborhoods organized around temples, palaces, and residential areas.